So far our carving has done wonders for what we originally started out with, and actually looks like a guitar neck. The only thing we've got left to do are to drill the holes for the tuners and to cut the slots. And the first thing that we want to do is we want to drill the holes for the tuners first. If you were to cut the slots and then drill the tuner holes, the wood would just splinter out as soon as it broke through. So what we're going to do is we're going to drill the holes for the tuner first. Now, most of you are working with your plans, and in this case we were working with a 1937 Hauser guitar. Now, there's one problem with working with older plans like that, is that when you look at the diagram or the picture that shows the holes for the tuners, if you did a little bit of research, you'd find out that the center-to-center distance on the tuner holes for the 1937 Hauser are not normal size guitar tuner holes. Today, the distance between the tuners are pretty standard. But in 1937, things were made by hand, and there's no telling who made the tuners for the 1937 Hauser. So you always want to work with a new set or a modern set of tuners. Disregard the center lines that you're going to find on the plans, especially in older guitars. So here we have our our new set of tuners, and what we're going to do is we need some way to determine how far the tuner holes are going to be apart. Now, you can do it by measuring center line to center line. You may or may not get it right. When we go back to what we were talking about when we first got into this whole process of building the neck, I suggested that if you had an old guitar sitting around, is to take that the headstock, cut it in half, and that in itself could be a guide for the tuner hole, just like this. That's one possibility. In our case, we have this fixture here, which is something that we bought at Stir McDonald's. This slips over the side of the headstock. A clamp clamps it in place, and it's self-centering. Once it's clamped in place, the distance between all of these holes is centered on the headstock itself. So if we took a set of tuners, boom, they fit right in. So in our case, what we're going to do is use this fixture. So before we can use the fixture, one of the first things that we have to do is set a mark from where the nut butts up against the overlay to where the center line of the first tuner is going to be. And in this case, it's 50 millimeters. So what I did is I took my ruler and I marked off with my white pencil. I marked off 50 millimeters, and I flipped it over, and I marked off again 50 millimeters. So that's going to tell me where my tuner is supposed to go. Then I'm going to take my headstock, I'm going to put it in a drill press vise, and I've got two pieces of wood in there to support it. So I'm not going to be causing any problems there. And I'm going to look down, and I want this to be fairly level. I can use my ruler just to make sure it is. And it is fairly level. So I'm just going to butt it up. Next thing I'm going to do is, if you've noticed here, I've already marked out in white pencil the outline of where the slot is going to be. And if I take my drill, I put a piece of tape on the drill, and that's going to be my stop indicator. So when I put my fixture on and the tape comes down to the top of the fixture right there, that's going to be the bottom of where my drill is going to stop. So what I'm going to do now is I've got this in the drill vise. I'm looking through this hole right here, and I'm going to take this white mark and I'm going to center it in the first hole. And with that centered in the first hole, I'm going to take my clamp. I'm going to clamp it tight. Okay. And we're all set to go. I'm going to put this in a drill press and I'm going to drill out all 6 holes. So I'll be right back. Okay, we got the holes drilled out. Our hole, the first hole, is centered on our line. Same with the other side. So we know these are spaced correctly. We put our tuners in. Our tuners go all the way down to the bottom before they stop. Same on the other side. So we're all set. Now our next step is going to be to drill out or to cut out the slots, the string slots, and a couple of different ways you can do it. And if we go back to our form or our fixture that we made when we first designed the headstock, we had already cut out these holes. Now, you could take 2-way tape, you could center it on the center line, stick it in place, use a router with a top-mounted bearing, and use this as a router fixture or a router template to actually route this out. That's one way to do it. Another way to do it would be to take, since we have a center line that we've drawn here in white, I've drawn a center line on each one of the slots. I could take a Forstner bit, and you don't want to use a regular drill. You want to use a Forstner bit, because when this breaks through on the other side, this has less chance of it chipping out. And in this case, I have a Forstner bit that's exactly the same width as the slot, and I could use the Forstner bit on both ends of the slot. Then I can take a coping saw, I can cut it out away from the line. Then I can take a chisel and a file and sandpaper, and I can smooth out the slot. That's the second way to do it. Third way to do it is take our Forstner bit. Since I have a center line, I'm going to drill on both ends, and then I'm going to keep it on the center line and just walk it right down and keep drilling it out. And what I'm going to end up with are a bunch of little mountains when I'm all done, and then I'm going to take my chisel and I'm going to smooth the mountains out, and then I'm going to take a piece of wood with some 80 grit sandpaper and clean out the slot, and it'll be just as good as any other way of doing it. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my Forstner bit and my headstock. I'm going to go over to the drill press and drill out these holes. now that I've drilled out all the holes with the headstock lightly clamped to a nice block on my workbench, I'm going to take a chisel and I'm just going to put it on the line that I drew and just get rid of the little mountains. Just walk it right down the line. And if your chisel is sharp, it'll go rather quickly. And I'm just trying to stay within the line that I originally drew. And there we are. Okay. We'll take this out and we'll put it in the vise. After knocking off the little mountains, we've mounted it in the vise. And I'm going to take the flat end of the chisel and just very carefully try to smooth the rough area out the best I can. And I'm trying not to go all the way through because I don't want to get any chip outs on the other side. Then I'm going to take my painter stick with 80 grit sandpaper on it. And the reason I'm going to use this is I'm going to resist the temptation of using a rasp or a file. Problem is, if I use a rasp or a file, it's a pretty good chance, since I have a lamination on both sides, I'm going to chip out on one side or the other, and I don't want to do that. So I'm going to invest a lot more work with my sandpaper than I would if I had using a rasp. And we're just going to get in there and start smoothing it out. And I just keep going, and the idea is I want to get flat all the way across. Starting to look pretty good now. Okay. Take my brush. Getting there. Get a couple of chips on the other side. Okay. Back to the old sandpaper. Now I'm only doing one side. The other three sides are done on the slots. So when you are doing this for yourself, it's going to take a while to do. It's nothing that you're going to do in a short period of time. You just have to keep at it and end up with a job that looks very nice when you're all done. So I got to smooth out the corners, the round corners. Still see some marks in there. All right, we'll try the other side. Good. I've pretty much gotten to the point where, other than finish sanding, I'm ready to make the groove, or the slot groove, that is going to allow the strings to hit the nut without interfering. So I'm going to open my vise, move it around. Okay. And at this point I am going to use a file. I'm going to use a rather large, as soon as I find it, large round rat tail file. And I'm going to make a ramp. But in making the ramp, I'm only going to go downstroke, and I'm not coming out the other side. I'm not hitting the other side. So I'm not going to be chipping out, which was what I was afraid of when I was making these square. So I'm just going to make the ramp. And this is going to take a while. Got the workings of a ramp. Now let's get started on the other ramp. And again, half the battle is trying to make this look symmetrical when everything's all said and done. We're getting close, so I'm going to use my sandpaper and the dowel just to smooth it all out. Run it all in together. That looks good. So now I'm to the point where I've got my ramp pretty much set. Just going to smooth it down here. Smooth it down. All right. Okay. Looks good. In our final sanding, we'll really clean this up and make it look good. Now what I'm going to take the hard edge off of the slot. So for this, I'm going to use my round file to get the other end. Okay. So I'm just going to come down on a little bit of an angle to get that hard edge out of there. Okay. Looking good. That's looking good. All right, now that I've got it rounded off on both ends of the slot, we'll take our sanding stick and just do the same thing. Just get that hard edge off. It's worth it to spend your time and really do a good job getting the entire headstock looking symmetrical in terms of the slots on both sides, front and back. Because regardless of how great the guitar is and how great sounding the guitar is, when somebody looks at a headstock and the slots are uneven and the holes are uneven and they're not totally symmetrical, it sort of turns people off. So take your time, even if you've got to spend 2 or 3 hours on it. This is going to be a guitar that you're going to keep for a long time, and it's your first time that you're out there building a guitar. Make it look good. Take your time. Now, in terms of the video, I'm a little rushing because I also have to deal with the fact that people watching a video have a certain attention span, and yeah, I can't spend as much time on it as I would like to in front of the camera. But in terms of the final product, it'll look good because after the camera is turned off, I'll be spending my time making this thing look real good. So what I'm doing now is I'm just going into the ramp and I'm smoothing it out. When all said and done, when I'm all done, I'm still going to go over here and I'm going to really sand down and make the headstock look super duper. And the neck is done. We're all set. We're ready to go on to bigger and better things. So I'm just going to wipe this down with alcohol and we'll come back and we'll get one final shot. And there it is, the finished product. Our neck is all done.